My sister set my suitcase down on the porch boards and said, "The nursery's mine now. You don't pay for one thing in this house, and my baby's going to have a father in the room." I was 7 months pregnant. The suitcase was mine, but I hadn't packed it. Somebody else had folded my things and zipped them shut and carried them past the doorway of a room I'd spent 2 weekends painting and set them down where the mail gets left. My mother stood in the screen door and held it open for her. Not for me, for Marlowe. My sister came out with a second armload, my prenatal folder, my slippers, the paper bag from the hospital with my 30-week ultrasound in it, and my mother pushed the door wider so her arms would fit through and said, "Annalie, don't make a scene." Across the road, Bud Feeney was standing at the end of his drive with his hose running, and he watched the whole thing and he didn't turn the water off. Behind my mother, at the front window, there was a small face. My niece, Delaney, 9 years old, with her hand flat on the glass. She had a green stripe of paint on her wrist from Saturday, when she'd helped me roll pine trees onto the wall of that back bedroom, and she hadn't washed it off yet because she liked it. The roller was still in the tray in there, skinned over and going hard. "You've had 6 years of free," Marlowe said. She had one hand on her own stomach, 8 weeks along and already holding it like a trophy. 6 years, and the second I need something you want to make it about you. Figure out where you sleep, not my problem. I looked at the suitcase. Here's what I did not do. I did not cry, and I did not raise my voice, and I did not say the sentence I'd been carrying in my mouth for 6 years. Because there was a 9-year-old at the window and a house that's loud is a house a kid learns to hide inside of. That's the only reason. That's the whole reason. I took my house key off my ring. It took a second, because my hands were swollen, and the ring was old, and the key was brass and worn smooth on one side from a thumb, mine. I put it in my mother's hand and closed her fingers on it. "Top drawer of the kitchen desk," I said. "The blue folder, the mortgage papers. Read the first line at the top of page 1, and then you can lock whatever you want." My mother has a smile she wears when she's decided a thing is finished. She wore it into the kitchen. I heard the drawer stick and unstick, the way it always does in August when the wood swells. The smile came off her face in stages. She read the top line twice. I know she read it twice, because her lips moved twice, and then she stopped moving at all, and the paper came down against her leg, and she said, in a voice I had not heard her use since her mother died, "Call your father, now." Marlowe said, "Mama, what?" My mother didn't answer her. She was looking at me through the screen like she was doing arithmetic she'd never had to do before. I picked up my suitcase. The handle seam pressed a line into my palm and I let it, because pain that you choose is easier to hold than pain that gets handed to you. I got to the bottom step before I turned around. "Don't touch the mail," I said. That's all. Not a threat, not a speech. 4 words, and my mother's mouth opened, and nothing came out. And I walked to my car and set the suitcase on the back seat next to a crib box I'd had in the trunk since June. I sat a minute with the engine off. My son turned over under my ribs, slow, like something rolling in deep water. Then, while my sister stood on the porch of a house she had just declared hers, I opened the Gilmer County Clerk's website on my phone and paid $46.50 for certified copies of every document recorded against that address since 2011. I hit submit and backed down the gravel. 9 days. That's how long the clerk's office said certified copies take. In 9 days, an envelope was going to land on a desk with my name printed on it, and after that, nobody in my family was going to get to tell the story the way they'd been telling it. If you've ever been the one who paid for a room you weren't allowed to sleep in, stay with me. You're going to want to see what my mother read at the top of that page. I'm Annalie Pomeroy. I'm 29, and I'd been quiet for 6 years. Tell me in the comments where you were sitting the first time somebody in your family called you a freeloader. I read every one. The Pine Court Inn is out on 52, past the feed store, and it costs $71 a night if you pay by the week. Room 14 had a mini fridge, a coffee maker with no filters, and a window unit loud enough to sleep through. I set the crib box against the wall where a crib would have gone, and sat on the end of the bed with my laptop on a pillow, because my belly didn't let me lean forward anymore, and logged into the loan portal. Century Home Servicing, account ending in 0431, borrower, Pomeroy Annalie R. One name, mine. In March of 2020, my parents were 4 months behind, and the letters had gone from blue ink to red ink, and my mother was sitting at that kitchen desk at midnight with a calculator. I was 23. I'd worked payroll at Hollis Lumber since I was 18. I had no debt, and I had a credit score like a church attendance record. So they refinanced. $237,000, 3.1%, 30 years. My mother signed the security deed because the house was hers and only an owner can pledge one. I signed the note because I was the only one in the family whose credit could hold it. Her name on the property, my name by itself on the promise to pay. And every month since, on the first $1,326 came out of my account at Bellamy Fork Federal and went to Century. Principal, interest, taxes, insurance. I pulled the payment history. 78 payments, $103,428, out of a payroll clerk who makes $23.40 an hour. That's not the part that made my hands go cold. I scrolled down past the payments to the correspondence log, the part nobody ever looks at, and there was a line item dated February 11th, 2025. Payoff quote issued. Third-party request. Authorized by grantor of record. Somebody had asked my mortgage company what it would cost to pay off my loan 18 months ago, and nobody had ever said one word to me about it. I sat in a rented room with a window unit rattling, and I read that line until the letters stopped being letters. Somewhere out on I-20, my father was doing 70 in the dark with a load of drywall, and my sister was standing in a bedroom with a pine forest on the wall, deciding what color to paint over it. And I thought somebody wanted to know the number. The question wasn't why my sister put my suitcase on the porch. I already knew why she'd said she did. She said it was the room. The question was why she needed me out of that house in August, when her baby wasn't coming until April. I fell asleep with the laptop open and I dreamed about the kitchen desk drawer sticking. My mother did not call me that night. She didn't call me the next day either. Marlo called at 6:40 the next morning, and I let it ring, and she left a voicemail I saved and still have, and I'll tell you what she said because it matters later. In a room with a long table in it, when a woman from the credit union set a phone down on the table and played it, she said, "Mama's all worked up about some paperwork, which, okay, fine, but you need to understand something. You living there was a favor. Favors end. I've been carrying this whole family while you sat in a back bedroom feeling sorry for yourself, and I'm not going to apologize for finally putting my own child first. Call me back when you can be an adult about it." 22 seconds. Hold on to that voicemail. In 11 weeks, the timestamp on it was going to mean something completely different than what my sister thought she was saying. I went to work. That's the thing nobody puts in these stories. You get thrown out of a house at 7 months and then it's Thursday and you clock in, because Hollis Lumber runs payroll on Thursday and 406 people get paid because I sit at that desk. Vernon, my supervisor, looked at my ankles at about 10 and said, "You want the good chair?" "I'm all right." That wasn't a question, Annalie. He's 66 with 2 artificial knees, and he wheeled it over himself. I sat in it and I opened a new manila folder and I wrote a date on the tab in pencil. August 19th. That's all it was. A folder with a date. I want to be honest with you because I've heard the way people tell these stories, like they woke up one morning full of fire. I wasn't full of anything. I was tired and my back hurt and I had a folder. But I'll tell you what I stopped doing that Thursday. I stopped waiting for my mother to open a door. One thing before I go further, because it's the hinge everything else swings on. The house at 41 Piney Gap Road belongs to my mother. Her mother left it to her in 2011 and the deed has said Charlene R. Pomeroy, sole owner, ever since. My father never went on it. My grandmother had opinions about men and land, and that's how it stayed. I was never on the deed, I was on the note. That's the split nobody in my family ever bothered to understand. And it turns out to be the most dangerous arrangement in America. My mother granted the deed, and I signed the note. She owned it. I owed for it. And a lender will talk to the owner of record about her own property all day long, whether or not the owner is the one making the payments. The man who set that up was my cousin, Del Ledford, who works loans at Piedmont Grove Credit Union out by the bypass. Second cousin, technically. He came to the closing in 2020, in a checked shirt with our grandmother's chin, and he put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Don't you worry about a thing, cuz. I got you." I printed my copies himself. I want you to remember that hand on my shoulder. On day 2, I went to the doctor. 32 weeks and 1 day, blood pressure 128/84, which Dr. Ives said was fine, and she'd like it to stay fine. Then she asked the question they always ask, about my living situation. And I said I was staying out at the Pine Court a few weeks, and she wrote something down and didn't look up while she wrote it. On the way out, I took one of the little paper appointment cards. Next visit, September 3. I put it on the mirror in room 14, and I drew 13 boxes underneath it in ballpoint pen, and every night I crossed one out. A grown woman making boxes on a motel mirror. But it was the first thing in 6 years that was mine, and on a schedule, and you'd be surprised what a row of little squares can do. Marlowe posted on day 5. The back bedroom with the furniture gone and the pine trees still on the wall, captioned, "Big plans for this space." 31 people said congratulations. My Aunt Sherry said, "You've always been the strong one, honey." Delaney called on day 7 from the school office phone at 3:12, which is how I know she called before the bus, standing at a counter with a secretary listening. "Are you coming back?" "Not right now, baby." "Is it because of the paint?" "No, it's not because of anything you did." She was quiet, and then she said, "There's a lot of mail on the desk." And the secretary said something to her, and she said she had to go. I sat in the parking lot of Hollis Lumber with my phone against my chest. Day 9 was a Friday. The envelope from the Gilmer County clerk was waiting at the mill when I got there, because I'd had it sent to the office instead of the motel, and Vernon put it on my desk and said, "That looks legal," and went to get coffee. Certified copies, every instrument recorded against 41 Piney Gap Road since 2011. The warranty deed to my mother. My mortgage. The security deed from March 2020. My name on every page like a heartbeat. And behind it one more. Security deed. Recorded February 11, 2025. Grantor, Charlene R. Pomeroy. Grantee, Piedmont Grove Credit Union. Securing a commercial line of credit in the principal amount of $118,000 to Wild Hearth Events, LLC. Behind it, an appraisal. The house in the 9 acres it sits on. Paved road frontage, $415,000. February 2025. $118,000. Against my mother's house, the house my paycheck holds up. I read it 3 times. The window unit in my head went off, and everything got very quiet and very precise, the way it does when you're looking at a number that's wrong on a payroll report, and you already know whose number it is. February 11th, the same day somebody asked Sentry for a payoff quote on my loan. They needed to know what was owed on the house before they could borrow against what was left of it. I sat in Vernon's good chair with 406 people's time cards open on my screen, and I looked at the signature page. Charlene R. Pomeroy. In my mother's careful cursive, the C looped twice the way she does it. Witnessed and notarized. And at the bottom, in the box for the lender's officer, a signature I'd been looking at on Christmas cards my whole life. Del Ledford. Everybody asks why I didn't drive over there that afternoon and put those pages on the kitchen table and scream. Because paper doesn't care how loud you are. Because a woman screaming at her family in a driveway is a story her family gets to tell for 30 years. And a woman with certified copies is a problem that has to be answered by somebody in an office. And because of one line on page 9, the security deed said the borrower, my sister's company, had to maintain the property, keep the senior lien current, and provide the lender with an updated owner's affidavit and inspection access upon any modification or extension of the line. There was a date typed in the extension schedule, September 21 days away. My sister didn't put my suitcase on that porch because she wanted a nursery. She had until September 18th to hand a credit union a sworn piece of paper about who lived in that house and who paid for it. And I was living in it, and I was paying for it. I closed the folder. I finished payroll. 406 people got paid on time. Then I drove down to the office of the Bellamy Fork Ledger and spent $24 on something almost nobody outside a title company ever buys. The Ledger is the legal organ of Gilmer County. Every foreclosure ad, every sheriff's sale, every notice of a debt going bad inside these lines has to run in it, by law, before anything can be sold. And before it runs on page 9 on a Wednesday, the proof sheet goes out by email on the Friday before, to anybody who pays for the subscription. The girl at the counter typed my address into a spreadsheet and said, "Have a blessed day." $24. From that afternoon on, if anything belonging to my family was headed for page 9, I was going to read it 5 days before the rest of the county did, and nobody was going to know I'd read it. On the way to the car, I stopped in the shade of the annex steps and stood there a second with my hand on the top of my belly, which is what I do instead of crying, and then I went and bought a peach cobbler at the Ingalls because Sunday was in 2 days and I had never in my life missed a Sunday dinner at my mother's house. I wasn't going to start now. The whole family eats at 41 Piney Gap on Sundays at 2. I came at 10 till, with the cobbler, in the blue dress that still fit. Marlowe's Tahoe was in the drive and Trent's truck was behind it, a black F-250 with the dealer plate still in the back window, $74,300 of truck for a man who does part-time HVAC. My mother opened the door and looked at the cobbler and not at me. "Well," she said, "you came. I brought dessert." Marlowe was at the table. She'd cut her hair. She looked at me the way you look at a wasp that's gotten inside and hasn't landed yet. "Nobody told me you were coming." "I've been coming for 29 years. Delaney came around the corner at a dead run and hit me at hip height and hung on, careful of the belly, because I'd taught her careful, and my sister said, 'Delaney, chair.'" Dinner was pot roast. Marlowe talked about the barn for a solid 10 minutes. 2 weddings booked for October, a corporate thing in November, a girl from Atlanta who wanted the whole property for a weekend. She said the word "we" a lot. She said, "I'm just glad I'm in a position to carry this family." And my mother said, "You always have been," and passed her the rolls. Nobody asked me where I was sleeping. I ate. I complimented the roast. When Delaney spilled her tea, I got the towel. And at the end, while my mother was washing and Marlo was on the porch on her phone, I dried a plate and said, easy as weather, "Mama, that paperwork you signed in February, what was that?" She didn't stop washing. "Insurance," she said. "For the barn." Marlo said the barn had to have paperwork on the house because the house is the only thing free and clear. Free and clear. I set the plate in the rack. "You read it?" Honestly, she looked at the window over the sink. It was 11 pages. "Did Dell come out here or did you go in?" "He came out. He brought the stamp lady." She wrung the rag. "Your sister was standing right there. She said it was so the barn could get its insurance rate down." I said, "Okay. That's all. Okay." And I hung the towel on the oven door the way she likes it, folded in thirds. Because here's the thing about my mother that took me 29 years to learn and about 4 seconds to use. My mother does not lie. My mother just doesn't read. She signs what the confident child puts in front of her, and then she believes the sentence that came with it, and the sentence becomes the truth in her mouth forever. She wasn't lying to me. She was reciting. On the porch, on the way out, my father's truck was gone, and his mail was in the basket by his chair where my mother stacks it when he's on a run. A phone bill, a flyer for gutters, and an envelope from a company in Hartford with a window in it, unopened, with a fold across it like somebody had shoved it in a back pocket and thought better of it. I didn't touch it. I want to be very clear about that, because later a man in a conference room asked me twice. I did not touch my father's mail. I looked at it, and I got in my car, and on the drive back to the Pine Court I called him, and it rang out to voicemail, because he was somewhere around Shreveport with his phone in the sleeper. I crossed out another box on the mirror that night. 21 days had turned into 19. The letter from Century came on a Wednesday to my post office box in town, and it was the one thing in all of this I did not see coming. Notice of lapse in hazard coverage. Lender placed insurance to be added. The homeowner's policy on 41 Piney Gap Road, my mother's policy, the one my escrow account pays for every month, had been canceled on July 30th. Not by her, and not by me. The carrier had canceled it after receiving an application to add commercial event coverage to a residential policy, weddings, tents, liability for 200 guests. And the underwriter had looked at that and decided they didn't want the house at all anymore. So Century was buying insurance for it themselves. Lender placed $6,400 a year for a policy that covers the bank, and not one thing that belongs to anybody who sleeps in that house. My payment was going from $1,326 to $1,859, $533 a month, because my sister wanted to put a Barnes business on a bedroom house's policy. I stood in the post office lobby with my thumb on the paper. A man held the door for me and said, "Careful now," looking at my stomach, and I said thank you. $533 a month is 2 prenatal copays and a week of the Pine Court and the crib I hadn't taken out of the box. I did not call my sister. I called Sentry, and I sat on hold for 51 minutes in the mill parking lot on my break, and when the woman came on, I asked her 3 questions and wrote the answers on the back of an envelope. Could somebody who isn't the borrower touch my account? Not the account, ma'am, but the owner of record can ask us anything about her own property, including what it would take to pay the loan off. Had anybody done that? There's a request on file from the owner of record dated February 11th, 2025. Could I get the complete servicing file? Yes, ma'am. Written request, 30 days. I mailed the written request that afternoon. That's 3. That's 3 pieces of paper in the ground now. The certified copies, the ledger subscription, the servicing file. And not one person in my family knew that any of them existed. And that is the only kind of power a person like me has ever had. I didn't want to fight. I wanted a record. A fight my family can absorb. A record has to go somewhere. The Saturday before Labor Day, Delaney called me from the school office phone again, except it was Saturday, so she was calling from the barn, from the landline in the little office where the brides sign things. Aunt On? That's what she calls me, Aunt On, since she was 2. Hey, Bug. Mama painted the trees. I switched the phone to my other ear. What do you mean painted? Gray, she said. The whole wall. She said it was too busy for a baby. Then, in a smaller voice, I helped you do those. There was a pine forest on that wall. 9 trees. She did 4 of them with a roller she could barely hold in both hands, and the 4th one leaned, and I told her that's how they grow on a hill, and she believed me and was pleased with herself for a week. That's okay, I said. We'll do more trees. Where? I didn't have an answer. And I'm on the couch now, she said, because the baby needs my room after the baby. Mama says it's temporary. I don't mind. The couch is closer to the TV. There's a particular quiet a kid uses when she's already decided not to be a burden. 9 years old, and she'd found it, the same way I found it at 9, in the same house, in the same room she was just moved out of. That's when it stopped being about me. I said, Delaney, where's your jar? She'd been saving quarters since February in a pickle jar for the 6th grade trip to Savannah, $41 in quarters, counted every Sunday. She said, Mama borrowed it for the tent people. She's putting it back. I sat down on the end of the bed in room 14 and put my hand flat on the bedspread. Okay, I said. You know what? That's fine. You go on and I'll call you Tuesday. Okay, love you, Aunt On. I hung up and I did not move for a long time. I have been broke. I've been talked over at my own birthday. I handed my sister a check for the barn's first deposit in 2019 and watched her tell the family she'd saved for it. None of that did what a 9-year-old saying the couch is closer to the TV did. Hope is a chair you sit in while you wait for somebody else to do the right thing. I got up out of it. I got out my laptop and I opened a blank document, and I typed a list, and I want to tell you exactly what was on it, because there's nothing in it that a person isn't allowed to do. 1. Request everything I am entitled to request, in writing with dates. 2. Answer every question anybody asks me completely and truthfully, and never volunteer one thing they didn't ask. 3. Do not warn her. 4. Let the 18th of September happen. That's it. That's the whole plan. 4 lines. I read it twice, and then I wrote a 5th line at the bottom, and the 5th line was the only one that had anything ugly in it, and it was this. She has 13 days of thinking she won. I only need her to have 10. Then I went and got ice from the machine, because my ankles were the size of grapefruits, and I sat with my feet up on the crib box, and I slept better than I had since the porch. Marlo came to the Pine Court on the 8th of September at 10 in the morning. I knew it was her before I opened the door because nobody else in Gilmer County lays on a horn in a motel lot. She had Trent with her, and she had a folder, and she had her hair done, and she stood in the doorway of room 14 and looked past me at the crib box and the mini fridge and the row of crossed-out boxes on the mirror, and I watched her decide that she was winning. God on. She said it gently. That's the thing. She said it so gently. You can't have a baby here. It's clean. It's a motel. She stepped in without being asked and sat on the end of the bed. Trent stayed by the door, looking at his phone. I've been talking to Dell, and there's a way to fix this for everybody. Mama's a wreck. Is she? You put that mortgage thing in her face, and then you disappeared. That was a cruel thing to do to a 61-year-old woman. She opened the folder. So here, family, settlement, and mutual release. It said across the top, in a font I recognized from the credit union's letterhead. 3 pages. I read every word of it while she talked over me, which is a thing I recommend, because people will tell you what a document is for while you're reading what it actually says. It said I acknowledged I had resided at 41 Piney Gap Road as a guest of the owner. It said I claimed no ownership interest, no equitable interest, no tenancy. It said I released all claims against the owner and against Wild Hearth Events LLC. It said I would cooperate in removing my name from the senior obligation at such time as refinancing became available. It did not say one word about who had paid 78 mortgage payments. It did not have to. That's what a release is for. It's just paperwork, Marlowe said. It's so the bank knows there's not a whole thing going on with the house. You know how they are. I said, who needs it by when? And my sister, who had just told me it was nothing, said by the 15th, 2 days before the extension. I looked at the second page for a moment longer than I needed to. Trent shifted his weight by the door. Then I said, do you have a pen? Her whole face changed. It came up like a window shade. On. She grabbed my hand, both of hers around it. Thank you. Thank you. I knew you'd do the right thing when it actually mattered. I've always said that about you. I know you have. And then I did the thing I do for a living, which is what nobody in my family ever remembered about me. Paragraph 2 said I had resided at 41 Piney Gap Road as a guest of the owner. That sentence was not true, and I was not going to put my name underneath it. I have spent 11 years correcting other people's forms. You do not sign a line that's wrong. You strike it, you initial it, and you let the person who wrote it decide what to do about it. So I drew one line through paragraph 2, on both copies, and in the margin beside it, I wrote in ballpoint, signed as to release of claims only. I do not adopt the recitals in paragraph 2, ORP. Then I signed both copies. I dated them. My sister stood 18 inches away and watched my hand move across that page and never once looked at what the hand was doing, because she had already gotten what she came for, and her mind was out in the parking lot. And then I said the only thing in that entire conversation that I had planned in advance. Marlowe, I want it notarized, and I want my copy stamped too. I'm not going through this twice with Mama. She laughed, relieved, generous, already gone in her head to whatever came next. And she said, absolutely. Dell's stamp lady's at the pharmacy till 1. So the 3 of us drove to the Bellamy Fork Pharmacy, and a woman named Ruthie, who does notary work between the register and the photo counter, put her stamp on 2 copies of a document my sister needed a credit union to see, and she wrote both of them in her journal, in ink, with the date and our driver's license numbers and our signatures. September 8, 2026, line 6 and line 7. Marlowe took her copy and put it in the folder and hugged me in the parking lot with real feeling, and she said, it's going to be so much better now. I said, it's going to be different. She didn't hear it. People don't. Then she and Trent drove off to the barn, and I stood in front of the pharmacy holding my copy and the pen Ruthie had let me keep. And I want to tell you what I felt, because it wasn't triumph. It was the feeling you get at the top of the first hill of a roller coaster, right when the chain lets go and you're not falling yet. 10 days. Here is what my sister did on September 15th, and I did not learn the details until October, in a room with a long table. But I'm going to tell you now, because you have earned the right to know it before she found out I knew. To extend a commercial line of credit that's secured by real property, the lender makes the owner sign a fresh affidavit. It's routine. It's boring. It's 4 paragraphs. It swears that no person other than the owner is in possession of the property. It swears that no other party has made any claim to it. And it swears that all payments on any senior encumbrance have been made by or on behalf of the owner. My mother signed as owner. And because Wild Hearth Events LLC was the borrower's managing member signed a certification underneath that everything above was true and correct to her knowledge, under penalty of perjury, and under the federal statutes that apply to statements made to insured financial institutions, which are printed in 7-point type at the bottom of that form, and which nobody in the history of the world has ever read out loud. Marlowe Hargrove signed that. She signed it on the 15th, in Dell Ledford's office, with the family settlement stapled behind it as her proof. The settlement I signed on the 8th, with Ruthie's stamp on it, and a line drawn through the middle of it that she never read. She thought that paper was her shield. It was her signature on a statement about who paid for that house. filed with a federally insured credit union, a week after I put 78 payments into a written request for my complete servicing file. I didn't trick her into it. I want to be precise, because it matters to me. She wrote that sentence about herself before I ever gave her a piece of paper. She'd been telling it at Sunday dinner for 6 years. All I did was decline to correct her, one time, in writing, in front of a notary. There's an old thing my grandmother used to say when a dog got into the hen house. She said, "Don't chase it out. Shut the door and let it eat till it's slow." On Friday the 11th, at 6:02 in the morning, the first proof sheet came to my inbox. Rummage sales, a rabies clinic, 2 estate notices out of cherry log, nothing that had anything to do with me. I read every line of it anyway, and then I put my phone face down and went to work. The gender reveal was Saturday the 19th, at the barn, at 4. I was invited by group text, in a message with 9 people on it, and the text said, "Family is everything, 4 p.m., wear pink or blue." I went. I went because Delaney would be there, and because there is nothing more useful than being the calm person in the corner of a room where somebody else is talking too much. The barn is a real barn, a dairy barn from the 40s on leased acres off Copper Mine Road, and Marlowe has done a beautiful job with it. String lights in the rafters, old brick floor, it smells like hay and lemon oil. About 60 people, 2 of the aunts, half a church, Trent's whole HVAC crew. Marlowe stood on a hay bale with a microphone. She thanked everybody for the support. She said this year had been a season of building. She said the barn had 2 more Octobers booked than last year, which was not true, but nobody there was in a position to know that. Then she said, "And I want to say something about family." I was by the drink table with a plastic cup of sweet tea and Delaney leaning on my hip. "Some of y'all know we've had a hard summer," my sister said. And she found me over the top of 60 heads, and she smiled at me with enormous warmth. "My sister's been going through it, and we've opened our home to her for 6 years, no questions, no rent, no nothing, because that's what you do." Somebody said amen. "And she's about to be a mama on her own, which is not easy, and I want everybody here to know that we love her, and we're going to help her figure her situation out." 60 people looked at me and my stomach and my Walmart dress and made a soft, warm noise. I said nothing. I put my hand on Delaney's shoulder. Then Marlowe stepped down off the hay bale, and she came across that brick floor with a piece of paper folded in half, and she pressed it into my hand in front of my Aunt Sherry, and she said, at exactly the volume where 4 people could hear it, "That's just so you have it, no pressure at all, whenever you get on your feet." I opened it because she wanted me to. Invoice. Wild Hearth Events LLC, on the barn's letterhead, with the barn's logo. Room and board, 41 Piney Gap Road, June 2020 through August 2026, 75 months, at $128, $9,600. Dub upon receipt. Aunt Sherry made a small sound. Marlowe put her hand on my arm and said, "Don't even think about it today. I'll tell you what I saw, because it was not $9,600. What I saw was my sister's company, on its own letterhead, with its own logo, charging me rent for occupying 41 Piney Gap Road for 75 consecutive months, 4 days after she certified to a federally insured credit union that no person other than the owner was in possession of that property. She had just handed me, in front of witnesses, a signed document that contradicted the sworn statement she'd made on Tuesday, because she couldn't help it. Because winning wasn't enough for her. She had to have the room see her win. I folded it back along the crease and put it in my purse. "Thank you," I said. "I'll take care of it." Marlowe said, "You're a good sport, on," and went to do the confetti cannon, and it was blue, and everybody screamed, and Delaney got confetti in her hair and laughed the way kids laugh when the noise is finally about something happy. I stayed 40 more minutes. I helped carry the drink tubs to the truck. I hugged my mother, who held on a second longer than she meant to, and then said, "Your face is swollen, are you drinking water?" which is my mother's whole vocabulary for love. And on the way out, at the door of the little office where the brides sign things, Del Ledford caught my elbow. Checked shirt, our grandmother's chin, he'd had a couple. "Hey, cuz." He steered me half a step out of the doorway. "Listen, while I got you. There's a little formality thing on your mama's file. Nothing. But I need to be able to show that you don't claim any interest in that property. Marlo says you signed something? I signed something. Right. He rubbed the back of his neck. It's just, with your name being on the first note, and you living out there, underwriting's got questions. You know how they are. I looked at him for a second. Then I said, Dell, would you like me to put it in writing? His face did something relieved. Would you? Man, yeah, just whatever you got, email me. Hein gave me his card. Piedmont Grove Credit Union. Commercial lending. NMLS number under his name. You're a lifesaver, he said. I sat in the field they use for parking, with the string lights coming on in the barn behind me, and put both hands on the wheel. He asked me for it. I want that in the record. Every single thing I sent to that credit union, an officer of that credit union asked me for, in a doorway, at a party, with a drink in his hand. I drove back to the Pine Court, took my shoes off, and ate a peanut butter sandwich standing up. At 9:40 that night, I wrote the most polite email of my life. Dear Mr. Ledford, thank you for asking. As requested, I am providing documentation of my relationship to the property at 41 Piney Gap Road, Bellamy Fork, GA. Attached, please find 1. A copy of the family settlement and mutual release. I executed on September 8, 2026. Notarized, as you requested. Please note the marginal notation and strike-through at paragraph 2, which is in my hand and was made before signing. 2. My complete payment history on the senior obligation, account ending 0431, from March 2020 through September 2026. 79 payments, $104,754, all drawn on my personal account at Bellamy Fork Federal, which is the only account they have ever been drawn on. 3. A copy of the Notice of Lapse in Hazard Coverage issued August 6, 2026, and the lender placed insurance notice increasing my monthly obligation to $1,859. 4. A copy of an invoice I was given today by Wild Hearth Events LLC for room and board at 41 Piney Gap Road for the period June 2020 through August 2026. Please let me know if you need anything further. I am happy to answer any question you or your underwriting department may have. Respectfully, Annalie Pomeroy. There is not one accusation in it. There is not one adjective in it. I did not say the word fraud, and I did not say the word lie, and I did not say my sister's name. I attached 4 PDFs to a man who had asked me for documentation, and I hit send, and put the phone face down, and lay on my side with a pillow under my belly, and my son kicked twice under my hand hard like knocking. That email went into a credit union's file at 9:52 on a Saturday night. It sat there, unread, all day Sunday, while my sister posted 41 photographs of blue confetti. Dell Ledford opened it at 7:41 on Monday morning sober. He read attachment 2, and then he read attachment 4, and then he did the only intelligent thing he has done in this entire story. At 7:58, he forwarded the whole chain to his compliance department with 4 words on top of it, which I have since seen, and which were, please advise, not mine. And at 8:15, a woman named Priya Raman opened it with her coffee and read it, and then pulled up the owner's affidavit that had been signed the previous Tuesday. And she put her coffee down. Nothing happened on Monday, as far as my family could tell. That's the thing about paper. It doesn't bang. It goes into a queue. On Tuesday the 22nd, Marlo called the credit union to ask why the extension hadn't funded, and a person she didn't know told her the file was in review and someone would be in touch. On Wednesday, the tent company's deposit check came back. On Thursday, she called Dell 9 times. I know it was 9 because he told the investigator. By then, Dell had been told not to speak to her, and he sat in his office and watched his phone light up with our cousin's face 9 times and never picked it up. Meanwhile, I went to work, and I went to my 36-week appointment, and Dr. Ives said 134/88 and told me to cut salt and stop standing so much. Marlo came to room 14 on Thursday night at 11:40. She didn't knock. She hit the door with the flat of her hand 4 times, hard enough that the chain jumped. Annalie, open this door. I did not open the door. I stood on the other side of it in a nightgown with my hand on my stomach and listened to my sister tell me, at that volume, in a motel with 11 other rooms occupied, that I was jealous, that I had always been jealous, that I couldn't stand to see her have one thing, that she had a child and a business and people depending on her, and I had a motel room and a bastard. That's the word she used, through a door, at 11:40 at night. A man 2 doors down opened his and said, "Ma'am, there's people sleeping." And my sister said, "This is a family matter." She hit the door twice more and then she left, and I heard the Tahoe fishtail on the gravel, and then it was quiet, and the window unit came back on. I sat down on the floor with my back against the bed, which at 36 weeks is a stupid place to sit, and stayed there about 10 minutes. Not because of the word, I've been called worse by better. Because for 1 second, standing in the dark on the other side of that door, I had wanted to open it and say, "It's already done, and it wasn't me, it was you, on the 8th, in Dell's office with a pen." That's the only real danger in a thing like this. Not getting caught, getting seen. The pull to make sure she knows. I didn't open the door. I wrote down the date and the time on the back of the Sentry envelope instead. 11:40 p.m., September 24, 6 witnesses, one of them the night clerk. Then I got up off the floor because my hip had gone numb, and I put a chair under the doorknob, and I slept. My father got home on Sunday the 27th, at 11 in the morning, with 5 weeks of road on him. He'd been out to Laredo and up to Kansas City and back, and my mother had been calling him every night for a month, and he'd been hearing about it in 11-minute pieces at truck stops. And what he understood when he pulled into that gravel drive was that his 2 daughters had had a falling out about a bedroom. He came in and put his keys in the dish and hugged my mother and asked what was for lunch. And then he sat down in his chair by the basket where his mail stacks up when he's gone. 5 weeks of it, phone bill, gutters, a church newsletter, a card from the VFW, and an envelope from Hartford, Connecticut, with a fold across it, that had been sitting in that basket since August. He opened it with his thumb because he opens everything with his thumb. Ardent Mutual Life, Acknowledgement of Collateral Assignment. I have the copy. I've read it maybe 200 times. Dear Mr. Pomeroy, this letter confirms that we have recorded a collateral assignment against policy number 4819663, insuring the life of Wade A. Pomeroy, in the face amount of $150,000. The assignee of record is Piedmont Grove Credit Union. This assignment was executed by the policy owner. We are notifying you as the insured of record. Please contact us with any questions. He read it twice. Then he walked into the kitchen where my mother was making tomato sandwiches and said, "Charlene, what did you sign about my insurance?" And my mother said, "The Barnes insurance." And my father said, "Honey, this ain't the Barnes insurance. This is mine." Then he said the thing that ended 41 years of my father never once raising his voice in that house, except he didn't raise it. He set the paper on the counter next to the tomatoes and he said, quiet, "Somebody has put a lien on me." My mother started to say something and stopped, because she was standing in her own kitchen, and she was beginning to do the arithmetic she'd started on a porch on the 19th of August, and had been refusing to finish ever since. She'd signed 11 pages in February with a stamp lady at the table, and her confident daughter standing right there. She had signed as owner of a house, and she had signed on a separate form as owner of a policy, because she'd bought that policy on my father in 1998 through the School Employees Association, $58 a month out of a cafeteria paycheck, whole life, and she had paid it every month for 28 years, and it was hers to sign. She had pledged her husband's life insurance as collateral for her daughter's business debt. And the reason she could not put it together in August, when I handed her a mortgage with my name at the top, is that for 6 years she had been living inside a sentence somebody else wrote for her. Marlowe carries this family. Annalie lives here free. You cannot take a sentence like that out of a person by arguing with them. You have to let a piece of paper do it. My father called me at 12:20 that afternoon. He said, "Ani," nobody calls me that but him, "I need you to tell me what's going on with the house, and I need you to start at the beginning, and I don't want you to soften it." So I did. From the refinance in 2020 to the security deed in February to the affidavit on the 8th, 22 minutes. He didn't interrupt once. At the end he said, "Where are you sleeping?" "Pine Court." "Since when?" "August 19th. There was a silence on that line that I felt in my teeth. Then my father said, "I'm coming to get you." And I said, "Daddy, no, not yet." Because here's the thing. If my father had driven out to that motel that Sunday and brought me home, my sister would have had a scene to fight. And a scene is a story. And in 3 years at a cookout, somebody would have said, "Well, it got ugly on both sides." A woman from Piedmont Grove's compliance department had called me on the 23rd, on my lunch break, and asked me 4 questions in a flat voice. Was that my account? Was that my signature? Was the marginal note mine? Would I confirm it in writing? And thanked me, and hung up. Her name was Priya Raman. She did not tell me one thing. She didn't have to. I said, "There's a woman at the credit union named Priya Raman. Give her the letter from Hartford. Don't give it to Marlo. Don't give it to Dell. Don't mail it. Drive it to the branch on Monday and put it in her hand and get a receipt for it." My father said, "That's it? Drive a letter?" "That's it." I was quiet a second. Then he said, "You always were the one who read things." I put my hand over my mouth and made no sound at all. He said, "Ani, you still there?" "I'm here." 79 payments, he said. "You said 79. "Yes, sir." "All right," my daddy said. "Monday." On Monday, September 28th, my father drove a 2009 Silverado 40 minutes to the Piedmont Grove branch by the bypass and asked for Priya Raman by name, and put a letter from Ardent Mutual in her hand and got a stamped receipt for it, which he brought home and put on the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a peach. 2 days later, the credit union declared the line of credit in default and accelerated it. $118,000 payable now. They did not go after my mother's house for it. By then, Priya Raman's file had a strike-through in my handwriting in it, a payment history, and an affidavit that disagreed with both, and no lender in America forecloses on an innocent owner using a lien its own compliance officer has already flagged. They went after Wild Hearth Events LLC instead. The equipment, the barn lease, everything the company had, and all of that had to be advertised. The proof sheet came to my inbox on a Friday at 6:02 in the morning. I was at my desk at Hollis Lumber by 7, with a cup of decaf going cold, 406 time cards open on one screen, and next Wednesday's page 9 open on the other. Sale of assets under power, Wild Hearth Events, LLC, a Georgia limited liability company, registered address 41 Piney Gap Road, Bellamy Fork. My mother's address, printed in the legal notices, under my sister's company name. I read it twice and set the phone face down and put both hands flat on the desk. My sister did not know yet. My mother was at the Kroger. Marlo was at the barn with a bride from Atlanta, walking her through the string lights, promising her October. For 5 days, I was the only person in my family who knew what was going to be on page 9. $24 that had cost me. Back in August. From a girl at a counter who told me to have a blessed day. It ran on the first Wednesday in October, on page 9, between a church rummage sale and a notice about a rabies clinic. In a town of 4,000 people, page 9 of the ledger is the most read page in the county, and everybody pretends it isn't. And what 4,000 people read that Wednesday was my sister's company being sold out from under her at the door of the county courthouse, at a family address everybody in this town has been driving past for 40 years. By Wednesday afternoon, 2 brides had called the barn. By Friday, the October wedding, the girl from Atlanta, the whole property for a weekend, $11,000, had canceled and asked for her deposit back. And there was no deposit to give back, because that money had gone out of the barn's account in June to cover something else, and had not been in it since. On Sunday, a flatbed came to the parking lot of Bellamy Fork Baptist during the 10:45 service and took Trent's F-250. The auto lender had gone back through his application after the credit union called them, and the income he had written on it did not exist and never had. There is not one single thing in this story that I planned less and enjoyed more than the fact that a repossession agent chose the church lot. They came out at noon to a rectangle of dry asphalt. Trent moved in with his brother and Elijah 11 days later. I need to tell you about the Tuesday after, because it's the worst thing that happened in all of this, and it did not happen to me. Marlo brought Delaney to the Pine Court. 6 o'clock, still light. I came out of the office with a bag of ice, and my sister was standing by the Tahoe with her hand on the back of my niece's neck, and Delaney was in her school clothes with her backpack still on. "Tell her," Marlo said. Delaney looked at the ground. "Tell your aunt what they said at school." I set the ice down on the hood of my car. Marlo. "No, she needs to hear it." My sister's voice had gone up into a register I hadn't heard since we were kids. A boy asked her if her house was getting took. 9 years old. "That's what you did. That's what your paperwork did, Annalie. Tell her, Delaney." And my niece stood in a motel parking lot with her mother's hand on her neck and her backpack on and said very quietly, "I don't want to." I did not say one word to my sister. I got down on the curb at 39 weeks, which took me a while. I said, "Bug, look at me." She looked at me. I said, "Nothing that's happening is your fault, And nothing that's happening is because of anything you did or said. Grown people signed papers. That's all this is. Papers that grown people signed, and now the papers are being read. She said, "Are you mad at Mama?" I said, "I'm not going to answer that in front of her. That's not fair to you." She nodded, like it was the first honest transaction she'd had all week. Then I stood up, badly, and I looked at my sister over the top of my niece's head, and I said the only sentence I said to her in that parking lot. "You can bring me anything you want, don't bring her." Marlo put Delaney in the car and drove off, and left me standing there with a bag of ice melting on the hood. That night, I called a lawyer named Bet Halloran in Ellijay who does family and elder work, and I hired her with $1,400 I did not have, and the first thing she said after I explained it was, "Who's got the child on Wednesdays?" The state investigator's name was Corinne Ayers, from the district attorney's economic crimes unit, and she came to Hollis Lumber on the 9th of October, and Vernon put us in the break room and stood outside the door like a bank guard. She was maybe 50, with reading glasses on a chain, and she had a banker's box. She asked me questions for 2 hours and 20 minutes, and I did not editorialize once. At the end, she took her glasses off and said, "Ms. Pomeroy, I want to ask you something that isn't in the file." "Okay." "You had all of this in August," she said. "The deed, the payment history. You could have brought it to us the week you got put out. Why'd you wait till after she signed the affidavit?" I looked at the vending machine for a second. Then I said, "Because in August, all I had was a family argument about a bedroom. Y'all can't do anything with that. And if I'd brought it to you in August, she'd have unwound it. She'd have paid a little something, put it on a payment plan, told everybody I attacked our mother, and it would have gone away, and then she'd have done it again in 3 years with something else." "So you waited." "I answered the questions I was asked," I said, "in the order I was asked them." Corinne Ayers put her glasses back on and wrote for a while. Then she said, "For what it's worth, the invoice is the one that'll do it, not the affidavit. The affidavit's a lie. The invoice is a lie in her own handwriting on her own company's letterhead about the same fact 4 days later, in front of witnesses." I said, "I know." She looked up. "I do payroll," I said. "It's always the second document." She almost smiled. On the 14th of October, Marlo came to the Pine Court alone in the middle of the afternoon and sat on the hood of her car in the sun until I came out, because I made her wait, because I was on the phone with the crib company. She looked bad. Her hair was up in a way she'd never let anyone see, and she'd lost weight she couldn't afford to lose at 16 weeks along. She said, "They're going to charge me." I said, "I know. Trent's talking to them." Her voice cracked on it. "He went in with a lawyer on Friday, my husband." I didn't say anything. "On." She got off the hood. "I have a little girl. Do you understand that? I have a 9-year-old and I'm pregnant, and you're going to put me in prison over a bedroom." And there it is. That's the sentence. Every single person who's ever done what my sister did has that sentence ready. And it is always, always shaped like family. I said, "You put my suitcase on a porch on a Wednesday. That's what this is? That's—" "Let me finish." I didn't raise my voice. I have never in my life raised my voice at my sister, and by then it had stopped being restraint and started being a kind of weather she couldn't get out of. "You put my suitcase on the because you had a deadline on the 18th. Not because of the room. You needed to be able to swear that nobody but Mama lived in that house and that Mama paid for it, and you couldn't swear it with me standing in the kitchen. I know that now. I didn't know it on the 19th. Her face went white around the mouth. "So no," I said. "It's not about a bedroom, and I'm not putting you anywhere. I answered a question your loan officer asked me, with documents, and I've told the truth every time anybody's asked me anything, and every single piece of this is your signature." Marlo stood there in the sun. Then she said, "You could tell them you don't want to press it. They listen to the family." "It's not my case," I said. "It's the state's. You didn't lie to me, Marlo. You lied to a bank." She got in her car and she sat in it for a minute before she started it. "There's one more thing from that week." Sentry ran its escrow analysis at the start of October, the way they do every year, and because they had bought a $6,400 policy in August that nobody had budgeted for, my account came up short by $1,914. I could spread it over 12 months and watch my payment go past $2,000, or I could pay it at once and keep the note current. The only thing standing between my mother and a lender with every legal right to take a house when the note under it goes bad. I paid it at once. $1,914 out of the account I'd been building for a crib, a car seat, and 8 weeks of not working. Then, on the 16th of October, I drove out to Piney Gap for the first time since August, and I sat in the drive and my mother came out onto the porch and stood by the chair. I didn't go up the steps. She didn't come down them. I said, "The note's current. Whatever else happens, the note's current. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise." My mother put her hand on the back of the chair. She said, "Annalie, I didn't know what I was signing." "I know you didn't." "That's not—" She stopped. She looked at the porch boards, at the exact place where the suitcase had been, and I watched my mother understand something in real time, which is a thing you almost never get to see a person do. "That's not better, is it?" "No, ma'am," I said, "it isn't." She nodded slowly. I said, "You're going to keep this house. I'm going to see to it. And your name is not going in my statement to the investigator because you didn't know, and because you're my mother." She started to cry. "But you held the door," I said. "You held it open for her while she carried my things out, and I'm never going to be able to unsee that, and you're not going to be able to fix it by making me a plate." Then I backed down the gravel and left her standing there with her hand on that chair. That's the mercy. That's the whole size of it. I kept her name out of it, and I kept the note current, and I did not go up the steps. They induced me on the 19th of October because my blood pressure had been climbing for 3 weeks, and my son was born at 4:52 the next morning, 6 pounds 15 ounces with a head of black hair and a temper. I named him Wade Ellis Pomeroy. My father drove 9 hours off a run and came into that room with his hat in his hand and didn't say anything for a while. He looked at the baby, and then at me, and then he had to go stand by the window. My mother came at 9 with a bag of things she'd bought and stood at the foot of the bed. She said, "Can I?" And I said, "You can sit down." She sat. I let her hold him 10 minutes and then took him back. And she didn't ask for more than that, and that's where we are. And I don't know yet if that's where we'll stay. Nobody in that room said the word barn. The meeting was on the 4th of November, at 10 in the morning, in a conference room at Piedmont Grove Credit Union, with a table too big for the room and a bowl of mints nobody touched. Priya Raman from compliance, their counsel, a man named Foss, my lawyer, Bet Halloran, my mother, my father, my sister and my sister's attorney, a tired man from Blue Ridge who kept his hand on her forearm every time she opened her mouth, and me, with a 15-day-old in a car seat on the floor by my chair because I didn't have anybody to leave him with and because I had decided I was not going to pretend he wasn't part of it. Del Ledford was not there. Del had been placed on administrative leave on the 23rd of September. Foss talked first, in a voice like a hand on a shoulder, and what 9 minutes of it came down to was this: the credit union's position was that the security deed on the residence at 41 Piney Gap Road had been procured through material misrepresentation, that it did not intend to enforce a lien it had been induced to take, and that it would look to Wildhearth Events LLC and to its guarantors personally for the $118,000, which meant the house was coming off the fire, which meant Marlowe and Trent were on it instead. My sister's attorney asked for a payment structure. Foss said the file had been referred to the district attorney and to the federal people both, and that he had been instructed not to discuss structure with anybody. Then he turned to me and he asked me a question I had been waiting 11 weeks to be asked. He said, "Ms. Pomeroy, your father received a notice from the carrier at the property address in August. Did you open it?" "No, sir." He looked at his notes. "Did you handle it, move it, photograph it?" "No, sir. It was my father's mail. I looked at it in the basket and I left it in the basket and I went home." That's the second time he asked it. A lawyer asks a question twice when he already has the answer because he wants somebody else in the room to hear you say it. Then Priya Raman said, "I'd like to play something." And she set a phone on the table and played 22 seconds of my sister's voice, recorded at 6:40 in the morning on the 20th of August. Favors end. I've been carrying this whole family. I'm not going to apologize for finally putting my own child first. When it stopped, Foss said, "The affidavit is dated the 15th of September. That call is dated the 20th of August, the day after Ms. Pomeroy's belongings were removed from the property." He closed the folder. "It's the sequence we're concerned about. That's the whole difference, in a room like that, between a mistake and a plan." My sister looked at the phone like it had come out of the wall, and then Bet slid a folder into the middle of that table and said, "My client has a proposal, and it's not a negotiation. I'd had it drawn up 3 weeks earlier, before the baby, sitting in room 14 with a laptop on a pillow. An irrevocable trust. 41 Piney Gap Road conveyed into it by my mother. Beneficiaries, Delaney Jane Hargrove and Wade Ellis Pomeroy, in equal shares, neither able to touch it before 25. My mother retains a life estate, the right to live in that house, in that room, on that porch, until the day she dies, and nobody can sell it out from under her, and nobody can borrow against it, because a trustee's signature is required for any encumbrance. Trustee, me. Bet had spent 5 weeks getting the one piece of paper that made it possible, a written consent from Century, 3 paragraphs long, waiving the clause in my own security deed that would have let them call the whole loan the second the house moved into a trust. Without that page, nothing on the table would have been worth signing. I keep paying the note, every month until it's paid or until I'm dead, whichever comes first. Foss read it and looked up and said, "You're taking on the senior debt permanently and taking no interest in the property." I said, "I've been paying it for 6 years and I've never had an interest in the property. This just writes down what was already true." Marlowe said, "So you get the house?" "No," I said. "Delaney gets the house, half of it, when she's 25. I don't think there was a sound in that room for 4 or 5 seconds. My sister looked at me across a conference table, and I watched her go looking for the angle, the way she does, the way she has since we were children, and not find one. Then Bet put the signature page in front of my mother, and that's the thing I'll remember when the rest has gone soft. My mother, 61 years old, in her good blouse, in a room full of lawyers, picking up a pen and holding it exactly the way she'd held that screen door, whole arm, braced, keeping something open for somebody. Except this time she'd read it. Bet had gone through it with her line by line at her kitchen table on Sunday, out loud for 2 hours, and my mother had asked 9 questions. She signed it. Then she put the pen down and she said to the table, not to me, "I want it in there that I read it." Bet said, "It's in there, Mrs. Pomeroy. It's called an acknowledgement." My mother nodded. "Good," she said. "I went out to Piney Gap that Saturday to get my winter things out of the shed, and Delaney came out the back door with a shoebox in her arms. It was a shoebox with the lid rubber banded on. She said, 'I have to give you something and I think I'm in trouble.' We sat on the tailgate of my father's truck. She took the rubber bands off. 19 envelopes, certified mail. Green cards still attached to some of them, the little cardboard ones. And on 2 of those, in the box where the recipient signs my name, in handwriting that has never once been mine. A couple of window envelopes from Ardent Mutual, one from the county tax assessor, all of them addressed to 41 Piney Gap Road, most of them addressed to Annalie R. Pomeroy. None of them opened. "Mama said to put the mail in the burn barrel," Delaney said. "The ones that weren't for her. She said it was junk and Papa's stuff gets forwarded anyway." "When?" "Since the week after you left." She was picking at the rubber band. "Every day when the mail came, but your name was on them." "Yeah. So I kept them in my closet." She looked up at me, and her chin was going, and she said the thing that took the legs out from under me. "Because I thought maybe one time one of them would be a letter for me. From you. Like a real letter. And I didn't want to burn one if it was. I have been thrown out of a house. I have been handed an invoice in front of 60 people. I have been called a word through a motel door at midnight by my own blood. A 90-year-old kept 19 envelopes out of a burn barrel because my name was on them and she thought one might be for her. That's the one that got me. On a tailgate, in November, in front of the child. She said, 'Are you crying?' I said, 'Yes.' Then she said, 'Aunt On, if I give you these, does my mama go away?' And there it was. The whole thing, in a shoebox, held by the only person in that family who had never once done anything but what she was told. I could have lied to her. 'People will tell you it's kinder.' I said, 'I don't know. It might make it worse for her. It might not change anything. I'm not going to tell you it won't matter, because it might.' She looked at the box for a long time. Then she put it in my lap. And then she took one envelope back off the top. A plain one, with my name on it, from the tax assessor. The least interesting piece of paper in the whole box. And she held it against her chest. 'Can I keep this one?' she said. 'I don't want to open it. I just want to have one that's still coming.' I said yes. She still has it. It is on the shelf over her bed, next to a jar with $41 in quarters in it, which is a story for another day. I gave the box to Bet on Monday, and Bet gave it to Corinne Ayers, and Corinne Ayers put it in an evidence bag and called somebody in Atlanta, because obstruction of the United States mail is not a county matter, and neither is a signature on a green card that belongs to a woman who never touched it. Marlo and Trent were living in an extended stay off 515 by then, 2 rooms on the ground floor with their things in the bed of a borrowed truck under a tarp in the parking lot. Delaney asked to go see her mother on the 15th of November, and my father drove her, and I stayed in the car with the baby because I wasn't going to make that moment about me. She was in there 19 minutes. When she came out, she got in the back and buckled herself in and looked out the window, and about a mile down the road she said to nobody, "I told her I'm not mad." My father said, "That's a big thing to say, sugar." I told her I'm not mad, but I don't want to live where the mail gets burned. Nobody said anything after that. My father drove. The baby slept. The mountains past Elijah had gone the color they go the second week of November, when the oaks give up. 9 years old. That's the sentence that ended my sister. Not the affidavit, not the invoice, not the 19 envelopes. That's the one she'll be hearing at 2 in the morning for the rest of her life, and I didn't write it, and I couldn't have. The state indictment came down on the 20th of November. Theft by deception. 2 counts of false statements and writings, which is what Georgia calls it when you swear to something in a document you know is not true. Forgery in the first degree for the green cards. The federal part, the statements made to an insured credit union, and the mail, is a separate track with separate people, and I've been told these things take a year, and it has. Ardent Mutual voided the collateral assignment on my father's policy on the 2nd of December and sent him a letter confirming it, which he opened with his thumb at the kitchen table and read out loud to my mother, all the way to the bottom. The Barnes landowner terminated the lease for non-payment on the 1st. They took the string lights down the week before Christmas. Del Ledford's license was revoked in January. He works nights now for a company in Dalton that sells home warranties over the phone. He sent me a card at Christmas. I didn't open it, and I didn't burn it either. It's in a drawer. One more thing about that November. My father came out to the trailer I was renting by then. 2 bedrooms, off Yukon Road, $480 a month. And he stood in the little back room where I'd started painting again. Because I'd started painting the pine trees again, on a different wall, in a different house, badly. 9 trees, the 4th one leaning. He watched me a while with his hat in his hands. Then he said 79 payments. I said 81 now. And my father said, "I want you to know I never once thought you were the one taking anything out of that house." I had to put the roller down. Because that's it. That's the whole thing I'd been carrying since I was 23 years old. Longer than that, since I was 9 and on a couch that was closer to the TV. Everything I ever held up in that family got counted as somebody else's. And a man who'd been 41 years on the road, who was never home, who missed every recital and every birthday and every closing. That man read a payment history all the way to the bottom, twice, and knew whose house it was before a lawyer told him. I have never in my life been so glad to be seen by somebody who almost never got to look. It's been 14 months. My sister pleaded guilty in March, to theft by deception, and to 1 count of false statements and writings, and she was sentenced in June to 24 months, with restitution of $118,000 that she will be paying at $40 a week for the rest of her natural life. She reported in July. She'll be out before Delaney starts high school. Trent went in first, with a lawyer, in October, and got probation and a fine for his part, and he filed for divorce in February from a room in an extended stay with a tarp over his things in the parking lot. He has a Corolla now. He pays what he can. Marlo's son was born on the 6th of April. His name is Nolan. He weighed 7 pounds 2 ounces and he has my father's ears. He lives at 41 Piney Gap Road with my mother, under a safety plan, and I drive him to his well-child visits when my mother's hip is bad, which is most weeks. I want to say the true thing about that, not the pretty one. I did not do it for my sister. I did not do it because I forgave anybody. I did it because a baby doesn't get to pick, and because I know exactly what it costs to grow up in a house where the arithmetic never got done, and I was not going to let 2 children in one family pay that same bill twice. My mother keeps the house. She'll keep it till the day she dies, in writing, with an acknowledgement page that says she read it. She sits out on that porch most evenings in the chair by the door. She's the one who calls now. She calls on Thursdays. She asks about Wade's teeth and about Delaney's spelling, and she has never once, in 10 months, asked me to come to Sunday dinner, because Bet explained to her what a boundary is, and my mother, whatever else she is a woman who follows a written instruction. Twice she's asked if she can see the baby, and I've said yes at my house on a Saturday. She has never asked me for the key back. I don't think she will. My Aunt Sherry told everybody at the rummage sale that it had all been blown out of proportion. And then in April she brought me a casserole and stood in my kitchen and said, "I didn't know what she was doing to you." And I said, "I know you didn't." And we left it there. The barn is a barn again. The string lights are gone. Somebody keeps hay in it. Delaney lives with me. Temporary guardianship since December. Permanent since May. In probate court in Elijah. On a consent. Trent signed himself in front of the judge. He read it, and he asked one question about visitation, and then he signed it and shook my hand in the hallway. My father is the standby. She has the back bedroom in the rented house on Yukon Road, and there are 9 pine trees on the wall, and she painted 6 of them herself this time, and the 4th one leans, because I told her once that's how they grow on a hill, and she has decided that's a rule. She's 10. She takes her jar to the bank now, in a Ziploc, and the teller counts it into the machine and hands her a slip, and she keeps every slip in a different shoebox, with a rubber band around it. She's still got the unopened envelope on the shelf over her bed. She told me in June what she wants to be. We were in the car. She said, "I want to carry the mail." I said, "Like a letter carrier?" And she said, "Yeah. Because you have to give people the thing that's theirs. You don't get to decide if they should have it. That's the whole job." I drove about a mile without saying anything. 10 years old, that's the whole job. My father took a local route in February, gravel and asphalt out of the yard in Elijah, home every night, 40% less money. He built the rail on my back steps himself. He comes Tuesdays and Fridays, and he holds the baby against his shoulder while he watches the news with the sound off. Wade Ellis is 11 months old. He has 2 teeth and a scream like a smoke alarm, and he has never in his life been in a room where somebody was yelling. I'm still at Hollis Lumber. Vernon retired in April, and I have his job and his good chair, and 411 people get paid on Thursday because I sit at that desk. Vernon's job came with Vernon's salary, which is $61,000 a year, and the lender-placed policy came off the account in December once the trust carried a real one, and the payment went back down to $1,381. And on the 1st of every month, that money comes out of my account at Bellamy Fork Federal and goes to Century Home Servicing for a house I will never own, that my mother lives in, that 2 children will split when they're 25. Payment 92 went out on the 1st. I don't mind it. I want to be clear about that because people expect bitterness, and I don't have any left to give them. That payment is the truest sentence about me that exists anywhere on paper. Somebody was holding that house up the whole time. Now the file says who. The first cold morning came early this year, the last week of September. There was frost on the windshield, and on the roof of the shed, and along the top rail of the fence at Piney Gap, when I drove Nolan out to my mother's. Delaney rode along. She had her hood up and her hands in her sleeves. We pulled in the gravel and my mother came out onto the porch, and she didn't hold the door for anybody because there wasn't anybody to hold it for. She came down the steps. She took Nolan out of the car seat herself. And Delaney got out and stood in the drive in that cold, at the exact spot where a suitcase sat on a Wednesday in August a year and a bit ago, and she looked at the porch boards for a second the way kids do when they half remember something. Then she said, "Aunt Ann, can we get donuts?" And I said yes. And that's the end of it. That's all of it. We got donuts, and the frost burned off by 9, and it was an ordinary Tuesday in an ordinary town, and there wasn't one single thing about it that anybody would have put in a newspaper. Here's what I keep coming back to, if you'll stay with me one more minute. Everybody in my family knew a story about me. The story was that I was the one who took. And that story was so comfortable and so often repeated that my own mother could stand in a doorway and hold a screen door open while my things went past her, and never once think to go look in a drawer. The paper was in the drawer the whole time, 6 years. Nobody read it. So this is what I'd want you to hear from a woman who spent a summer in room 14 at the Pine Court Inn. You do not have to be loud to be believed. You have to be documented. Ask for your copy. Keep your receipts. Answer honestly and completely when somebody asks you a question, and never once volunteer a lie on somebody else's behalf, not even a small kind one, not even to keep the peace at a Sunday table. That's the whole trick. That's all I did. Now let me ask you something because I genuinely want to know. Who in your family has a story about you that isn't true? And what's the piece of paper that would end it? Tell me down in the comments. I read them, all of them, usually at about 11 at night with a baby monitor going. And if this was worth your time, stay a while. There's more where this came from, and I'll be here. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourself, and don't burn anybody's mail.